All right, so tomorrow football starts. We got football on Saturday and Sunday. And as I said last week was the last week of power rankings as we know them. And now I'm down to a regular board. Now, don't pay any attention to all the hockey stuff around it because a lot of boards I have hockey stickers all the way around them. It's what I normally do videos on. But because there's some football tomorrow and Sunday, and I don't want to leave football fans hung in a lurch, let's take a look at where teams are at right now. So Baltimore's 12-2. They are first in the AFC. They're at Cleveland, who are 6-8, and they're at home against Pittsburgh, who are 8-6. I meant to get all those records on there. Missed that one. So the combined record of the teams are playing 14-14. Not impossible. I could see them going 14-2 and being the first seed. Now, New England's interesting. So they're 11-3. Both of their last two games are at home. They're against Buffalo, who are 10-4. If Buffalo wins that game tomorrow, or not tomorrow, on Sunday, Buffalo wins that game, suddenly they're tied for first. So New England has not nailed down first place in that division. Miami is their final opponent at 3-11. So they shouldn't have a problem with Miami, but Buffalo may not have a problem next week either. Kansas City's 10-4. Their last two games, they're at Chicago. These guys who are 7-7, they're mathematically out of it. And then they're at home against the LA Chargers, who are 5-9, and didn't have that big turnaround in the second half, as some people thought they might. I didn't have any faith that they would either. So these three teams are in pretty good shape, but again, very, very interesting matchup for the New England Patriots. So they're against their final quality opponent before they play Miami. And for Kansas City, their opponent's combined record 12-16. Those are winnable games. Now on the Houston side of things, this is where it gets interesting. So first they're at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay 7-7. Love playing spoiler. Tampa Bay would love to go 8-8 so they could say, hey, we're on our way up. And for Tennessee, that could be the one right there. So at 9-5, they could potentially be going to Tennessee at 9-6. Tennessee potentially could be 9-6. We could be watching a massive, important game to see who finishes with the better record between the two next week. Potentially. I still like Houston's chances of winning the division, though. Now, your number one seed in terms of wild cards and making it back to the playoffs are the Buffalo Bills. They're 10-4. They're at New England, as I stated, and then they're at home against the New York Jets. Worst case scenario, as I can see it, is they're 11-5. I can't see them losing against the Jets. I could see them losing against New England, but New England's had a hard time with quality opponents, and now you can see New England's probably going to have to go on the road if they're going to go to a Super Bowl, because it's highly likely Baltimore at least gets to that AFC Championship game. Playoffs are going to be fun. Now, Pittsburgh's in the driving seat with their last 2 weeks. They're at the New York Jets. If they go to 9-6, that's where, for Raiders and Browns fans who see their logo on the board, those logos no longer matter. They're gone. So all they have to do is win, but it's kind of the same thing with Tennessee. So these guys are just mathematically alive at this point. And going to the New York Jets, the Steelers should win that. They should go to 9-6, and then they're basically assured of a spot. Then they're at Baltimore to finish the season. Now for Tennessee, it gets kind of tricky. They're behind Pittsburgh on the tiebreaker. They need some help to get in. They're at home against New Orleans, and then they go to Houston. That's a really tough 2 weeks for the Tennessee Titans. And if they win out and go 10-6, that bodes well for next year, even if Pittsburgh somehow finishes 10-6. The one thing that may benefit them is, in that final week, Baltimore may not have anything to play for. Cleveland definitely won't have anything to play for that last week. But Baltimore may not have anything to play for. Maybe they rest a couple of guys. Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't stomp Pittsburgh, or maybe on the other hand they go, hey, we can get Pittsburgh out. Either way, right? So for Pittsburgh at Baltimore, the last week of the year, that could be a very interesting one. These could very well be the top 6. Tennessee needs some help. They've got a rough schedule. Their opponents have a combined 20-8 record. Now Cleveland and Oakland are still technically alive, so we'll look at them. They're both 6-8. For Cleveland, they're at home against Baltimore, so that's tricky. And then they go to Cincinnati. So at the very least, they'll end up being 7-9. Cincinnati's not going to win another game. The Raiders, they have a relatively easy schedule, although both games are on the road. And going to the LA Chargers and going in to play Denver. Denver, some pride's got to kick in, and Denver in December tends to be kind of hard to win at, but be interesting to see what happens there. AFC rivalries and all that wonderful stuff. So that's your AFC picture. And it's pretty clear that Tennessee is where your line is in terms of who's actually going to make it. I can't see Cleveland and the Raiders getting to 8-8, and these guys falling to 8-8, and allowing them to get in at all. So I can't see either of these teams making it. But that being said, it's the National Football League, and sometimes strange things happen on that last weekend. Now, in the NFC, the picture is really muddy. First, you got the Seahawks, who are at home against Arizona this week, who are 4-9-1. Then they have a home game against San Francisco. Of course, San Francisco is also 11-3. It is highly likely the division will be decided next week with that home game. And that should be a pretty fantastic matchup in Week 17. Because think about it. What's on the line in that last game is, does Seattle, and potentially on the line, I should say, in that last game, what's potentially on the line is Seattle having a bye week and having a home game and having home field throughout the NFC playoffs, or wild card week, they're traveling to likely Dallas. So that's a huge, huge game changer in terms of that last week's matchup. Now, Green Bay, they're 11-3, and they have something to say about that finishing first in the NFC thing. They're at Minnesota. Minnesota's 10-4. Technically, Minnesota, they're still in this as well. And then they go to Detroit. Detroit's 3-10-1. So Detroit, at this point, playing spoilers. And in that last week, we'll see if that game means anything. If they go to Minnesota and they win, they go to 12-3. That's pretty much it for Minnesota's dreams of winning the division. New Orleans, also 11-3. We've got a lot of teams at 11-3 or better in the NFL right now. We got 5 of them. And it feels like that's a lot. I don't know. But New Orleans, not an easy schedule. They go to Tennessee. Tennessee at 8-6, as I've said. They should be playing some desperate football. Then they go to Carolina. Carolina's 5-9, and the wheels have completely fallen off for the Carolina Panthers. And so that should be a win in that last week. They should at the very least end up 12-4. But I wouldn't be surprised by 13-3 either. Dallas, they're 7-7. They're leading their division. They're at Philadelphia this week. That should be a tremendously emotional game between two teams that won't like each other, knowing that whoever wins that game likely will end up winning the division. Dallas is then at home against Washington. Washington's 3-11. Philadelphia has kind of a cream puff schedule the rest of the way too, because they only have the one game, right? But so if they can beat Philadelphia and then beat Washington, there you go. You're it. And if you lose this one against Philadelphia, it's highly likely that does it. So the division's on the line this weekend. Now for San Francisco, who are 11-3, they've got to feel like this is kind of unfair, just a little bit. The LA Rams are 8-6. That's who they're playing next. They're at home for that game, and then they go to Seattle to finish out their schedule. That is a pretty tough schedule for them because LA isn't out of it yet, and for the Rams, there is some pride on the line here, and there is a way in. Now, Minnesota is at home for both games, so that favors the Vikings, but those games are against Green Bay and Chicago. Green Bay's 11-3 in Chicago. These guys here, that's a rivalry where the Chicago Bears aren't just going to roll over for the Minnesota Vikings. So it's possible Minnesota loses 2, gets to 10-6, and it leaves the door open for the Rams ever so slightly. The Rams, though, they have San Francisco this week, as I said, and then they're at home against Arizona. So Arizona, if they want to play spoiler, they can put the Rams out of the playoffs, and they can make a dent in any hopes that Seattle has for actually holding off San Francisco and winning that division. So there is some reason for Arizona fans to tune in over the next couple of weeks and say, hey, see, our team is pretty good. They just had a bad run. They'll be back next year. We went in, we beat San Francisco, or this is Seattle. We beat Seattle, and we beat the Rams. Going to be good next year, but we'll see what happens with that. That's why you got to play the games. Now, the Eagles at 7-7 are still mathematically alive because they're in the same division as the Dallas Cowboys. They have the game at home against Dallas. Your season's on the line with this one, and then they go to New York and play against the Giants. So the Giants, Washington, those are the final opponents for Dallas, and Philadelphia. Those are both kind of gimmies, considering both teams are 3-11. But it's going to be an interesting week. So, question for you guys is, can the Rams do this? Can Tennessee get past Pittsburgh? And of these teams, who gets to the Super Bowl? We're at that point where we can start talking about it. I really honestly still think Baltimore. I still like San Francisco's chances if they win the division. If they have to go on the road and play on the road throughout, it gets a lot tougher. At that point, I'm kind of leaning towards Green Bay, to be completely honest. Green Bay and Baltimore. But we're way out from that. And of course I dropped my marker. Of course I did. Doesn't matter. I don't need it right now. But I'd be interested to know your thoughts. So let me know what you think in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing right through you just happened upon this video. This video will likely be earlier next week than it was this week. This week was just crazy. Just bonkers crazy. The main channel went completely insane. And so my attention was over there. But here's your preview for this weekend. Let me know who you guys think is going to make it. And thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.